a lot of people took that news that they were kind of selling Metaswitch, and then I've been told that they're trying to sell Affirmed as well, because that's one of the reasons 3 decided it wasn't going to sort of renew a deal with Affirmed, because the sort of status of it was a bit uncertain.
Sure what was going on.
But the move away from that by them and the decision by you to kind of go for those assets, why does it make sense for you but it didn't make sense for them, I guess, is the basic question.
Because what Microsoft was trying to accomplish is fundamentally different than what we are trying to accomplish. Here's what I mean by that.
Hello and welcome back to the Telecoms.com podcast. It's been like 2.5 weeks or something like that because Pierre can't stop either getting ill or going on holiday or both. You're looking very healthy now, mate, compared to the last time I saw
Jesus,
you.
it's Easter, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were in France, but you said Miami.
No, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Fuck
France.
Tan.
France is for losers. He goes to Miami. So that's all good. And before I go off on too many tangents, I'm delighted to say that we've got a special guest who was, I think I can reel now, the special guest. We were going to have the one before, but we all kind of cocked our diaries up. But luckily, Dag Peak from Alianza, welcome.
Hey.
Luckily, you live in the UK, even though you're American.
I live in the UK now.
Yeah.
It's always sunny here, which is amazing.
I know, you brought the weather with you.
I bought an umbrella, and I haven't used it once. I don't
Well, you've even got Burberry trim on your coat, on your shirt. You've
fancy.
Totally
My wife
lent
will be
into
very
it.
happy that you called that out.
So welcome, Dag. Is that like a Nordic name or something?
Gosh, there's so many different ways I could take that, but the very...
I didn't mean it in a bad way.
No. So for your listeners, the very first thing that they can do is look up what my name means in Australia. It's hilarious and awful.
I'll look it up now.
Okay, let's see where this goes. But then, on top of that, I was actually named after a mountain in Canada, Mount Dag.
Oh,
an eccentric person.
No, just had parents that were hippies. So they were up in Canada back.
Is it actually called Dag Peak?
It is Mount Dag.
Mount Dag. Okay.
So there's that little twist.
do you think they were having fun with their own surname when they named you after a mountain?
No, they just thought it just all came together with that beautiful mountain peak up there, Little Dag. It was just a nice moment.
Have you ever gone there? And just blown people's minds.
I have.
But go and see that. I fucking called that.
Me.
Brilliant. I just looked up. So Google Gemini says, because these are the only search results we're allowed now. Says in Australian slang, dag can refer to an unfashionable, eccentric, or quirky person.
Yeah. Not cool is basically what it means.
Often used as a humorous, affectionate, or sometimes slightly dismissive way to describe someone. It can also mean someone who's a bit of a character. Well, I can tell already, Dag.
Okay, we got that part covered.
They have strange things in Australia. Like Bevan is like an insult in Australia if you call someone a Bevan. It's like calling someone, I don't know, a Kevin here maybe, or a Tracy.
Yeah, Australia's good for slang. I'd like to go there because I quite like my sort of London, my English slang.
But Bevan's almost not a name here. I mean, I don't know anybody called Bevan.
It's a surname.
It's a surname, but it's not a first name.
No.
It's over there. It's
Good Lord.
I've never heard it before.
No, well, there we are. You live and learn. And it can also be an adjective. You can be daggy.
Yeah, also not good. Yeah.
And daggy meaning that you're unfashionable or eccentric. I didn't see what's so wrong with that.
Well, there's deeper hidden meanings we'll talk about afterwards.
Right, okay. Fair enough. So welcome.
Thank you.
We're doing this one on a Tuesday, which will probably go out tomorrow, Wednesday, just to make up for the fact that we had the Easter holiday and all that stuff, and we haven't done one for a couple of weeks. But we still got another one planned for Friday, so we're just a podding machine.
People are going to be awash in podcasts.
Yeah,
They're going to be grateful
out
and thankful for all the content coming their way.
So that's what we do. We produce quality content. So what have we been up to? What did we do after the last pod? We said goodbye to our colleague Becky. Was that after the last pod?
Mm-hmm. She was a peach.
Wasn't the last one on a Zoom call?
No, we did another one.
Okay.
No, the one before that was when he properly had the plague and he couldn't even come in. And I'm just trying to think if we've done any worky things. I don't think we've got together, have we, since...
Well, it's been Easter, hasn't it?
Yeah.
No one really does anything in this country.
We're not so sad that we get together, like, just to exchange eggs.
Well, we got together for your birthday. That wasn't a worky thing.
That's true.
When you turned 50.
Yeah. That's
Many years ago.
many years ago, indeed. So I guess there's not much random bollocks to talk about, given that we haven't got together. How was Miami, Pierre?
Good, yeah.
Except
So
for
a lot
the,
of
except for
friends
the
there.
rain.
Oh, you got lots of friends out there.
Yeah, we did like a
Great
Airbnb.
cosmopolitan social life you have.
I know,
Friends
yeah.
in Canada and Miami.
Vancouver, Miami,
Yeah.
France. I mean,
And,
Venezuela.
I've got like 2 friends in North London. That's about it.
No, and
You
one of
mean
them had
total?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of them had a pool, so that was great. It's like basically like a resort. Yeah.
Oh right. Which
God.
what were you like on what is it called? Miami Beach or Key Biscayne or something like that?
We did go to Key Biscayne once.
My dad used to
see
live in Key
friends.
Biscayne.
That's like
Your
the
dad
most
lived everywhere. It's
posh
amazing.
area I've ever seen.
Yeah. We used to play.
Incredible.
We used to play tennis there, like in the middle of the day in the summer.
Wow.
We used to drink. You know the big
Did you
cans.
play at the place where the
Yeah.
Miami Open is?
Exactly.
Oh,
We
nice.
played there like in the off season.
It's like a sheltered like place from reality. Yeah. It's
Yeah, and we used to just sweat our asses off, and we the tins that the balls come in, we fill them up with water. We'd drinking one of them about every half hour.
Nice.
We'd have like salt crystals on our faces and stuff. It's fair to say I was a bit fitter back then. But yes, so my dad used to live in Key Biscayne. I was just telling Dag earlier all the places my dad lived.
Yeah.
So yeah,
He was
that
an
was nice.
international man in mystery, though, wasn't he?
He was, and that's
A
back.
rambling man.
Yeah.
He certainly was. Yeah, and that's back when he had some money.
Yeah.
I think he blew most of it there as well. Bless him.
Bob Seger?
No, I think that's an Allman Brothers song.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Gambling Man? Rambling Man?
Rambling man.
Yeah. So yes, I won't go off on too many random tangents.
Oh, I have a question, you guys.
Oh.
Who do you think Trump will pick as the next pope?
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Oh well,
I don't know,
yeah.
but
Can we go meta in joke and go? What does the Signal Group say?
Isn't there an American in the role at the moment? Sort of interim pope is an American.
Oh, there we go. I didn't know this.
He's called Kevin something.
Kevin.
Kevin.
Sounds
That's Pope
very-
Kevin. I might have got that wrong.
And
but
he
there
used to be on The Apprentice.
he's Irish American.
But he's qualified.
Yeah,
He's
he's
best of the
he's-
best. That's what everybody's
He's
saying.
nice and holy.
yeah.
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 Well, there we are. Oh yeah.
I'll
Well,
find his name.
we should give appropriate acknowledgement to Death of the Pope. He had a fairly good innings, 88, I think.
Yep. Just after meeting JD Vance.
Yeah. Coincidence?
Shook his hand as well. Sorry.
Yeah. Perhaps he cussed Trump to his face.
All
and
jokes
was
aside,
game
that
over.
must have felt weird for him. Like he woke up the next day, he's like, he what? He died? Like I just met him yesterday. Like what? That must have been a shock.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great headline that the Daily Mail's come up with. Interim Pope is a man named Kevin from Dublin.
That's some guy happens to
That's a
name
brilliant
Kevin.
headline. I approve of that.
Do we need an interim pope?
He's
I mean,
a
it's not
bishop.
like a CEO.
You need to have you not seen the film Conclave? You need to. You did.
Great
It's like a
movie.
CEO. That's
Great
exactly what it is. You basically need someone to run all the Vatican's sort of machinery.
Business.
Yeah, but usually
and business.
within a
while-
day they have the other guy, no?
No, you have a voting process that can drag on for days
There's a
and
movie for
days.
this.
There's a
Yeah,
if you watch
Conclave.
Conclave, you'll see exactly how a pope gets
that Ray
chosen.
Fiennes?
Everyone knows about the coloured smoke.
The
and all
coloured
that shit.
smoke.
Yeah, but I think that I remember last time he was quite.
So it's white smoke, I think, until
Yeah.
they eventually settle on a new pope, and then I think
Well,
it's
I'm
red smoke.
surprised
the other
it
way
does
around.
take
I
so
can't
long
remember,
because
but
these people normally become pope when they're half dead anyway.
it's incredibly
so sick.
political. It's all
Yeah.
about, do the progressives take over, or do you want someone who's more
So there's
conservative?
factions
There's
and all that
factions,
shit.
There's a lot of infighting. So the book, by the way, the Robert Harris book, is a bit better than the film, I think. Conclave is like
Right.
a really brilliant depiction of
He's a
how
good writer.
the process works.
It's like the Hunger Games.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing with the
Also a great
phrase
movie.
and stuff.
But I still don't get it. I mean, so the Pope himself is this figurehead. I don't think he is a CEO. He's not sitting there going, right, make sure them lot are praying or something like that. He's a figurehead. He goes around in the Pope mobile. He's normally fairly old and on his way to God
Experience.
when they
Yeah.
vote him in.
Yeah, well, maybe he is a figurehead, but the Vatican is a business, so
Yeah,
someone's running it.
Someone's running, but I would argue the same person is running it now who was running it while the Pope was still
Like the
alive.
man behind
That's why
the
I don't
scenes.
get why they
So
have
So
to
do you
have an
think those are
interim Pope.
cardinals, or do you think it's someone lower down the pecking order?
I don't know. Is cardinal what comes next after Pope?
The cardinals are the people who vote on
There's
the
a
Pope.
lot of expertise in this room on this topic. It's
The
great.
cardinals are the people who vote on the Pope.
Two agnostics arguing the toss about Pope. Anyway, I just still reckon I just don't get why we need an interim. I think we could all cope again, from my utterly uninformed perspective,
Yeah.
without a pope for a bit, we don't have to have
Well, we
Kevin.
could probably
We don't have to have Kevin step up and
Well,
go,
you
hey,
You know what?
I don't want to
I'm
be
keep
all
on
in
praying, you
Kevin.
bastard.
I don't want to be derogatory to Catholicism, but we could probably cope without a pope, though, couldn't we?
Ah, well,
It's
that's
bit
that's
like
that's a
saying-
different matter. That's different. I'm not in the habit of insulting Catholics, mate.
I mean, whether you could cope without an interim pope is like saying we could cope without a pope, though. I mean, it's not like you need
this
someone
country
to be
without a
pope
king.
and the world
All right.
stops without one.
Fair enough.
What did I step into here?
I know.
This is not about telecoms. Yeah.
Am I in the
well,
right, am I in the right podcast?
Would the world cope without the head of the Church of England? What would we do? I mean,
Fair point.
you know,
Fair point. I'm talking more about the period of time. If we accept the premise that we need a pope, then I just reckon I don't see why we need an interim. That's all. Anyway, let's just leave it there. And why don't we talk about
I encourage you to watch
telecoms?
Conclave, and then you'll change your mind.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. If I view the pope as the CEO of Catholicism, then fair enough. God, you always cane that first one really rapidly, don't you?
Kane, we've been in here for half an hour. I've been waiting for you guys to get going, talking about what we're going to talk
Making
about.
progress.
No, Dag's about same level as me. Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about stuff.
Let's talk about some stuff.
Talk
Not,
about-
not,
telecom.
not Pope
Let's
and
do
not Trump.
let's do some fucking telecoms.
Can it have people called Kevin involved in it though?
I'm all
see.
in, all in on Kevin.
So, Dag, what's your job title? Dag?
What do I do around here? Chief Product and Chief Technology Officer.
So, product and technology at Alianza.
You know
So
what
that's
I
quite an
really-
important job.
Very big deal. That's
You're kind of a big deal around here.
comma VBD.
Yeah.
Very big deal. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
well-
I keep telling myself that, and someday it'll stick.
Well, we had to make sure you're a very big deal because that's the only kind of person. we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
on this
That's the only kind of person that can step into this spacious room.
I do thorough vetting of our guests
Does your office
on the
smell of British
VBD
mahogany?
database.
70%.
And you just squeaked over. You're like 1% over the threshold.
Okay.
So there we are. And Alianza, why don't you just tell us from the start what Alianza's all about?
What is Alianza all about? Ooh. Okay, is that where we're going to start? We are in the business of connecting people.
Okay, well that's good that you're on this
Really?
podcast then.
Really, because that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Connecting.
Yeah.
If you look at our mission statement, and I know this is going to sound a little highfalutin, but it's absolutely true. We're in the business of increasing human connectedness. Human connectedness.
Okay. But you could argue all telcos are in that business.
Yeah,
so
but-
could you narrow it down a little bit?
But are they really in the business? No, and this is a very interesting point because I had an argument. Should I call it an argument?
Robust conversation.
We had a very robust conversation between my CEO, Brian Butler, and myself on exactly what you and I are just talking about right here. He said, we had an executive meeting. We were sitting around, and he said, you know what this business is fundamentally about? We're in the business of human connectedness. And what I said was, listen,
Look,
we're
mate,
already all connected. We all have phones and we have satellite internet and we have the connections are all there. And he's like, no, you're missing the point. Even though the connections are all there, even though we have the ways to get bits from point A to point B almost anywhere on the planet, does that mean that we are connected as humans?
right.
No. We have connections,
I see.
but we're lacking in some connectedness. So that's our kind of overall mission statement. But let's bring it down to reality. Right? In reality, we have two lines of business. So we just purchased Metaswitch.
Yes, about which we're going to grill you.
So that was a very big deal, right? That was a very big deal. So we acquired the Metaswitch assets out of Microsoft. That closed at the beginning of last month. So very, very fresh.
And so we had, when we had Sean Hackle on, he was from Microsoft, but he was very much in that Metaswitch area, wasn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
I imagine you dealt with him a lot as part of that.
Sean's a great guy. Sean,
Yeah.
if you're listening, how you doing out there? Sean was part of the executive team that basically handed over Metaswitch to us.
Right.
So we acquired that business. That business is fundamentally about the elements that operators use to build telco networks. Building blocks, session border controllers, soft switches, IMS cores, right? All the building blocks that an operator can use to build out a telco voice network.
All the stuff that in 11 years of doing this job, I've never taken the trouble to fully understand.
You don't need to.
Okay.
We got it. Actually, what I really have is a bunch of smart people up in Enfield
Right.
and a bunch of smart people all over the planet at Alianza who understand, actually understand how this stuff works.
The plumbing.
Yeah. I don't.
But Metaswitch's customer base would be telcos.
Telco operators.
Yeah. It's kind of core network type applications.
Core voice network.
Yeah.
So 800 of them, 800 service providers have purchased Metaswitch elements, SBCs, call control, soft switch, gateway, IMS from Metaswitch, now Alianza, to build their core voice network.
So here's one, bring it down to my fairly rudimentary level on this. You know, I write stories every now and then about how someone like a big kit vendor like Nokia Ericsson is doing someone's core. But obviously it's not necessarily this monolithic thing. There are people like you who get involved in aspects of it. Or would you do the whole shebang?
Yeah, interesting. So you take a big mobile operator, take DT, take BT. They will have dozens of vendors that they buy pieces from to build up their network. Dozens.
Yeah.
Not one, not two, not Nokia, not us, but the OSS BSS vendor, the billing vendor, the monitoring vendor, the security vendor. It's like they're baking a cake. DT, BT, they go and acquire all the ingredients, of which there are many, many ingredients, and they build their network, and they use that network to deliver services.
And thank God they do, because the whole business model for Telecoms.com and light reading kind of relies on there being quite a lot of those vendors.
Well, and we'll get to this point in a moment, which is why are there fewer and fewer of these vendors?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that in a second.
Sure.
Okay. So Metaswitch is one of those vendors in the mix of the cake that BT, DT, Orange, the big mobile operators around the world use to build their networks. We also deliver services for fixed line operators, right? Do you know not everybody is a wireless operator? Mm-hmm. There are still companies out there, telecoms, selling SIP trunks and cloud PBX fixed line services. So we sell bits and pieces for that. But that's just the Metaswitch business.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did we do before?
Yeah.
Right? What did we do before we bought Metaswitch?
So that gets you into a completely new area, the Metaswitch takeover. It wasn't something that you were involved in really before.
Yeah.
We weren't selling bits and pieces before.
Right.
What were you doing before?
Selling a complete solution.
Uh-huh.
Right? So let's imagine this. Here's a little story I love to tell. Let's grab some more beers while we're at it.
Yeah.
Settle in. You know this company called AT&T?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Heard of them? You know what AT&T stands for?
American Telephone and Telegraph.
Yes. How long
Excellent.
has it been since AT&T has been in the either telephone or telegraph business?
About 100 years.
AT&T is fundamentally, they are neither a telegraph company for sure, because that doesn't exist anymore.
No.
Is AT&T a telephone company?
As in like normal landline?
PSTN.
Is that the core of their business?
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
What is the core of their business?
Well, it'd be a combination of broadband and
what do they do?
mobile.
Broadband.
Yeah.
It's delivering packets.
Yeah.
The core of their business today.
Whether it's fixed or over the air.
Doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't matter. The core of their business, they are in the packet delivery business fundamentally.
Yeah.
It's been a very long time since they were a telephone company. Okay. So if you are a telco operator, there is a phase of your evolution where you eventually decide that it is not a core competency to run telephone infrastructure, to run all the bits and pieces that are required to deliver telephone services. Right? Here's a good example. Does AT&T have a CRM?
I presume so.
They absolutely do. Did they build it themselves? No, they did not.
Bought it off Oracle or whatever.
Why did they not? Because they are not in the
core
CRM
competence.
business.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of telco operators who are getting to the point of deciding that they are no longer have a core competency in running telco infrastructure.
Yeah.
So when they get to that point, they can look out into the marketplace and say, okay, I'm not in the business of running telco infrastructure anymore. Who can I outsource telco infrastructure to on a SaaS-based model while continuing to deliver all of the same telco services that I've delivered in the past?
Okay, that's interesting. This comes up quite a lot when we're talking about physical infrastructure such as towers and that sort of thing. And obviously there's a broader industry trend towards them selling off their towers to Cellnex or American Tower or whoever, and then leasing it back.
That's right.
The old sell and lease back thing, which I always think, and maybe I'm being too black and white about this, I always think when a company does a sell and lease back, they're having a bit of a cash flow crisis. There was a reason for them to own that asset in the past, and now they've decided that to realise, it's kind of like remortgaging or whatever. They've decided to realise some of the liquidity from that in the short term to deal with whatever short-term liquidity priorities they've got. But in the long term, they don't own the asset anymore. So that's what it feels like that they're doing, and it feels like you're fitting into another part of that mix.
Well, that's different from actually doing your own technology.
Yeah, but it seems like part of the same thing. Like Dag was talking about them sort of stepping back and deciding what their core competency is.
And it's not real estate. In your case,
It's not real estate, and
it's not managing towers.
And it's about them basically shrinking their core competency footprint down to the customer relationship or something like that.
Which is a key part of what they're actually doing, is maintaining the contract and the customer relationship.
And then doing less and less of all the other shit.
But delivering, and one of our key theories here is that what they really need to be doing is delivering more and more interesting services above and beyond just delivering simple connectivity.
Although some of them do see themselves as real estate companies,
Some do.
and some of them do. I mean, the whole Open RAN movement is arguably a push for telcos to have a bigger say about the technology and be more involved in that. I mean, Vodafone wants to have, I don't know how many it is, but loads of systems integrators working for it now, instead of doing all the work that someone like Ericsson or Nokia would rather do. So you do see this trend for some of them to want to get more involved in the technology side of the business.
Yeah.
I think AT&T was trying to do this and then basically thought, nah, we'll give up on that.
But these AT&T, like 10 years ago, used to have a massive developer summit at CES. They used to spend a lot more time getting involved in the plumbing and the what we consider to be
they basically sold all their stuff to Microsoft, didn't they? They sold all their core assets.
And then bought a bunch of it back in the form of Nexus. Sean might have talked about that last time.
Can't remember.
Yeah.
He might have, but I might have been drunk by that.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of, I suppose, to your point about sale and lease back. You know, they got rid of.
It's more the concept. I know these are different things, but the broader concept.
Yeah, they were doing a lot of. They had a lot of kind of core network assets that Microsoft acquired, and then they basically have a deal with Microsoft for this Nexus platform that I think Affirmed would be the application is the basis of that, as opposed to Metaswitch.
Yeah, Metaswitch / Alianza didn't have anything to do with Nexus. That remained with Microsoft.
Yeah, Nexus is more the infrastructure side of it, isn't it? I guess the platform.
It's a 5G core.
Yeah.
That Microsoft hosts inside of an operator's network, right? So if you're an operator who still wants to build all the pieces, but you want somebody else to manage some of the pieces inside of your network, well, there's a model for that. But let me come back to the Alianza business prior to the acquisition.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are an operator who doesn't believe that running telephone infrastructure is core. Okay, that's the first part of it. You were delivering a set of services off of that telephone infrastructure. You were delivering residential landlines and business lines and SIP trunks and cloud PBX. You still want to deliver those services, but you want to do it from a place where you don't have to manage the infrastructure. That was fundamentally and continues to be Alianza's core cloud business. So we've got a cloud communications platform. It lives in AWS and Azure. It delivers all those traditional wireline telco services. And so the telco can get rid of all their own old telephone stuff and subscribe to our services and sell those services out to their end customers.
Okay.
Is that similar to one of Mary's old companies? Was it Synchronos? Is that in that space? I mean, I obviously don't want to get you into a corner talking about competitors or other companies, but that just rang a bell.
Very few companies that actually do what we do, which is to deliver traditional telecom services from a cloud platform that we have developed and sell to service providers on a SaaS basis. There are very few companies that actually are doing.
And why do operators want to buy a cloud communications platform?
Yeah, because they don't want to run telephone infrastructure anymore, and they want to take the resources that they used to focus on running all that old telco crap and hand that problem over to somebody else.
What I would call the plumbing.
Yeah, that plumbing.
Right.
They're no longer in the business of trying to build and stitch all this stuff together, right? A telco doesn't really want to be a systems integrator.
Yeah.
That is a very challenging task. They would rather, in certain cases, right? Some do, right? Some still very much want to be in the cake making business. Get all the ingredients, put it together. Some still very much want to do that.
There are arguments for both models.
There's
some interesting geopolitical reasons for doing this, right? There's sovereignty and
careful American bloke before you start using words like geopolitical.
So
but this is sort of business facing stuff. The kind of stuff that an informer might buy for its employees to use.
Well,
It's not the sort of stuff that your average Joe blogs in his house who wants just
Yeah.
a broadband connection and a.
we actually sell quite a bit of residential fixed line voice in the United States.
Right.
So my neighbor, her name's Mary. She lives next door. She's 65. She will not get a mobile phone. All right, what I just said
Yeah.
may sound unbelievable, but it's true.
Oh, it's only about 5 or 10 years ago that we stopped having a landline.
Yeah. So there's
And that actually, talking about old people, that really did my mother-in-law's head in. She was like, how do I get hold of you?
what does it even mean?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we sell a bunch of residential
Yep.
fixed line services, and that's of course declining, right? That's not business that's growing, but there's business
But
there.
on the B2B side, you'd have competitors like, I'm guessing Ring Central are in this
So
sort of space.
they're a UCaaS vendor,
Right.
meaning
I mean, that's what I thought you were describing was unified communications.
That's
but
no here.
No, he's describing all like the plumbing.
No. Let's do it this way. I'm going to define two things. Unified communications.
yeah,
Unified communications means the unification of a business voice service
yeah,
plus messaging, chat, plus video, right? That's unified communications.
Yeah. And that's been around for a good 20 years
That's
at
been
least.
around forever. And that's
Yeah.
what Ring Central does. Okay, Ring Central, Zoom is now in the UC business. Microsoft Teams is in the UC business.
Very much
Yeah.
so.
What if you are a business that just wants a phone on a counter? You're a auto parts store, and you got a phone sitting there on the counter. How do you connect that phone to the phone network? With a phone line. That's a set of services that we sell, phone lines to
Okay.
phones that sit on counters.
right,
What if you have a PBX? Do you know there's still PBXs in the world?
yeah.
is that?
Private branch
branch
exchange.
exchange. You're a business who runs your own little tiny telephone switch. How do you connect that thing to the telephone network? Via a SIP trunk. So UCaaS is like what Ring Central does. Put an
Yeah.
IP phone on the desk, put soft clients on business computers. But this is one of our main points. The entire world doesn't run on UCaaS. Right? There are plenty of phones out there that are just people making phone calls. There's plenty of businesses out there that don't need to sit in front of a computer and do meetings all day.
Yeah,
Traditional telecom stuff. So we deliver all the traditional telecom stuff
Okay.
off of our platform.
so you,
And of course,
you
UCaaS.
differentiate it from unified communications, but
We do
Yeah.
UC too,
Yeah.
right? We've got cloud PBX plus messaging plus video,
Yep.
sure, but that's just at the top of that stack, right? It goes residential lines, business lines, SIP trunk, cloud PBX by itself. Then you add messaging and video to get UCaaS. And then you can add contact center and business text messaging, Teams integration. So you can add a bunch of capabilities into this stack of services. But it's that full stack of services that we deliver from our cloud
yeah,
that an operator can move to and not lose any of the services that they were delivering off of their old legacy
I
stuff.
see. All right, I'm with you now. So, and there's still quite a lot of demand. People still just want to be able to pick up a phone. Like, I've been rewatching
Yes.
my all-time favorite series, The Wire, and we got to the final season, which is based in a newspaper office. And it's so interesting to see it because this is about 20 years ago. The Wire was filmed, I think, and it's just the Baltimore Sun, but they've got this massive news floor. And tons of people there, and they're obviously all just picking up the phone the whole time and chasing down leads and all that sort of thing. And I was remarking to my wife while we were watching it, 'cause it's amazing how times have changed. I mean, there probably are, in really big papers, somewhat of a news floor, but not really. I bet you that whole concept of a big open plan news floor with tons of people talking on the phone is pretty much dead now.
But they do that for TV, like just, they're on computers basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it could be remote, or a lot of the communication could be not on voice. So I guess what I was leading up to is asking Dag whether there's still a big market for people who just want to be able to pick up a phone.
There's still a market for
do an
people
old school phone call.
who want to make phone calls.
Yeah.
Another big one is just the ability to make an emergency call, right?
Yeah.
You're a business, right? And something happens. You want a highly reliable phone to pick up and hit, what's the emergency services code here? 999?
Yeah.
It's 911 in the States. You want
Yeah.
to pick up a phone, hit 911, and know that's going to go through. So, yeah, is there a market for traditional telephony? Yes. And, of course, is the world going mobile? Yes, of course, which is actually a big part of the Metaswitch acquisition, because Metaswitch had components that go into mobile operators network that let them make mobile phone calls, right? So we're coming at this from both the fixed line point of view, things like SIP trunks and cloud PBX. And we're coming at it from the mobile point of view, where we deliver network elements that go into the operator's network that let them have the ability to deliver mobile calls.
In terms of your revenue streams, though, would they come from the telcos, or would you? Because you were talking about, you can go out and serve somebody who wants a mobile phone at the moment. Would you have a direct relationship with end users?
Never.
It's always going to be with the telcos themselves.
100% through the service providers.
Right.
Right. We never go out and compete with our service providers.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're certainly not getting into that last mile side of things at all.
The service providers has great relationships with their customers.
Yeah.
They've got a contract in place. They've served that customer for many, many years. And so we leverage that relationship through our service provider. So 100% service provider is our channel.
But the Metaswitch thing sounds quite very different from the other stuff you're doing. It's more like what you'd think of as a sort of traditional vendor developing technology type role.
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much. Like we'll go to a service provider and sell them our session border controller, and they will plop that session border controller into their network to interconnect with other networks, and we charge them maintenance and support. Very traditional telco vendor kind of arrangement.
So, I mean, why did you want to get into this? Because obviously Microsoft, for some reason, wanted to get out of that market, and they paid for. I mean, they never disclosed what they paid for it, but I know they're rumored to have
and
paid
I just
about
looked at the press release.
270
we didn't
million.
find out what these guys paid for them either.
Well, I think Microsoft was rumored to have spent about 270 million on Metaswitch back in 2020, and considerably more, I think, on Affirmed. But a lot of people took that news that they were kind of selling Metaswitch, and then I've been told that they're trying to sell Affirmed as well, because that's one of the reasons 3 decided it wasn't going to sort of renew a deal with Affirmed, because the sort of status of it was a bit uncertain.
Sure what was going on.
But the move away from that by them, and the decision by you to kind of go for those assets, why does it make sense for you but it didn't make sense for them, I guess, is a basic question.
Because what Microsoft was trying to accomplish is fundamentally different than what we are trying to accomplish. Here's what I mean by that. What was Microsoft's main goal? And I'm going to conjecture. We'll conjecture a little bit here. I don't have any inside knowledge on this. What was their main goal in acquiring Metaswitch and acquiring Affirmed and putting that thing together into something called Azure for Operators? What was Microsoft trying to do? Was it to continue just selling network elements to operators? Was that their goal? Absolutely not. Their goal was the following.
I'm gonna test you because I've looked up their press release. I'm going to see what their propaganda was at the time.
Okay, let's talk propaganda and then let's talk reality.
Yeah. Well, you do reality.
Doesn't say what they were trying to do. So.
What does Microsoft?
Do you want me to read you just the headline?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Microsoft announces definitive agreement to acquire Metaswitch Networks, expanding approach to empower operators and partner with network equipment providers to deliver on the promise of 5G. So that's what Yusuf Khalidi, Corporate VP of Azure Networking, said in May 14th, 2020.
And then right underneath that, what's the real reality? The true reality. Okay. What is the service that Microsoft cares almost most deeply about, excluding all things AI?
What Microsoft cares
about? What does Microsoft care about?
Public cloud.
Azure.
Yeah.
Azure. They care about Azure. Yeah. Okay. As Microsoft looks out into the world and looks at all the workloads that they could drop onto Azure, they look at databases and they look at web applications and they look at the IT world, right? The IT world is very well suited to be scooped up by AWS, scooped up by GCP, scooped up by Azure, and placed into public cloud. Okay, so they got an angle on that.
We've talked about that a lot. Certainly post-pandemic, the big public cloud providers been all over telecoms, especially at events. Events like Digital Transformation World.
Yeah, but this is exactly the point, right? So the big hyperscalers look out and see this next set of huge workloads, the telco workloads. Okay, now there's some IT in there, right? There's OSS, BSS, and provisioning systems. There's all that, but then you've got core call control, and you've got 5G core, and you've got session border controllers, and you've got IMS. You've got all those big, meaty applications that the hyperscalers would love to scoop up and put into public cloud. Mm-hmm. That's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
But
Well, they wanted to find out about how to do it rather than to actually do it.
well,
These are presumably
I've-
building blocks on that road.
I've
yeah,
heard,
Metaswitch and Affirmed were both building blocks
yeah,
that they were using to build those services that they would host in Azure to bring those workloads over from the telcos into Azure, fundamentally.
yeah.
So like Azure Communications Gateway was an example of that. That's what they were trying to do. It didn't work. It didn't work.
Any ideas why? Or is
I
that getting a bit close to the bone?
I have lots.
You've got thoughts.
I've got lots
Just
of
not
ideas.
sure you want to share it
why.
now.
Yeah,
That's fair enough.
You know, listen, one thing I will say, like Microsoft is a great company, one of the most valuable tech brands on the planet.
And the way, I've got to say, the way they reinvented themselves under Nadella, is it?
Yep.
Nadella.
Incredible.
From being a box shifter to what they are now.
Yeah.
It's a
Going
good effort.
from selling perpetual licenses of Windows,
and Office.
perpetual licenses of Office, making the transformation into a almost pure subscription company, moving into Azure. They have transformed their
Yeah.
business. It's been amazing. But that history,
IBM level of transformation.
it's been
isn't it?
it's been a beautiful thing to watch. But what are they at their core? I think at their core, they're kind of a enterprise productivity company.
Yeah.
At their core, like who they fundamentally are.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask them, they'd probably just say software company. There's a clue in the name, isn't it?
Yeah, so they're a software company that sells to enterprises.
Yeah.
They sell operating systems and they sell the Office suite, plus all the other things they've acquired over the many
People
years.
with something might talk about Xbox, but there you go.
Yeah, they do some of that
Yeah.
too. What are they not? They're not telco.
No.
That's not in their DNA. And so I think that maybe they were a little ambitious with this idea that they were going to be able to go to an operator and convince that operator to bring the crown jewels of that operator's voice network into Azure.
Yeah. This is something Ian and I've spoken about countless times on
Well,
the
I mean, I heard there was a bit of a mismatch between the sort of Metaswitch takeover anyway, and some of there was a guy, I can't even remember his name now, which is annoying me because he's a consultant who deals with sort of supporting Metaswitch, like people who take advantage. You probably know who I'm talking about because he did a big webinar immediately after the takeover happened that I managed to get onto and then wrote a story up on it. And I think one of the things he was saying was that there was a feeling that, I mean, Microsoft's ambitions were to have people like BT and Deutsche Telekom putting their core in the public cloud, a bit like the perception has been that AT&T's done that. It's a little bit kind of wrong because what they've really done, I think, is take Microsoft's technology stack and move it into their own data centers. Yeah. But even then, the only real customers they've been able to advertise at this kind of tier one level are AT&T and I think Etisalat in the UAE, whereas Metaswitch was more about tier two really clients and people that weren't really in that.
Not true.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
I can say that now. Metaswitch has sold network elements into 19 of the top 20 global service providers.
Right.
Right. So the guy that you were talking to, he is focused on that smaller North American market where Metaswitch was strong. And interestingly, I used to think that Metaswitch, that's what they were all about, right? Those little tier twos doing wireline services. Then I came to realize is that Metaswitch sells some really, really important and interesting technology into the big mobile operators, especially Clearwater, Perimeter, and Rhino. You guys know the Rhino platform?
No.
Rhino platform.
Doesn't mean Republican in name only.
No, there's an H in R, so that's how we use it to differentiate. But Rhino is this really interesting service creation framework for big mobile networks that our operators rely on very, very heavily. So, getting back to the Microsoft question, they didn't want to be just selling boxes to operators. Okay?
Yeah.
They wanted to move things into Azure. That didn't go that well. So they decided to unwind it.
Fair enough.
I mean,
Fail fast and all
they're
that.
actually not any different from the other public cloud. It's not like the other ones have advanced where they haven't. I think AWS has only really got Dish and Telefonica Germany that it can sort of flaunt as big tier one customers. And Google, I'm not really aware of them doing anything
That was what
outside.
was so conspicuous about the acquisition of Metaswitch and Affirmed was that Microsoft seemed to be betting big, whereas its competitors have perhaps been a bit more incremental and just tried to offer services. AWS is great at creating new tools and all that sort of thing. But I don't remember either of the other two doing conspicuous M&A to try and buy themselves a piece
No,
of the action, or at least
Affirmed
advance their
and
cause.
Metaswitch are the application side of it. Whereas if you talk to Sean Hackle, I think they would still very much say they're in the infrastructure game and they want to be doing the actual. They still have an ambition to be playing in the in the telco space as.
But did they view these acquisitions as a way of enticing people into
We met the guy who's the
CSPs.
CTO at DTW, and again, it's someone whose name I'm forgetting now. The CTO of the Microsoft kind of telecom business.
He's got an Italian surname.
Yeah, and Rick Liavano.
There we are.
And Rick Liavano Rick Liavano's point about the Metaswitch and the Affirmed takeovers when Scott and I interviewed him together was that we don't want to go into competition against Ericsson and Nokia, who sell things like the 5G packet core. What we want to do is gain an understanding of what it takes to run those sorts of things in a public cloud environment, and therefore they sort of justify the sale of Metaswitch, I think, now, and probably when they do sell Affirmed, although that seems to present more challenges to me, given that some people are sort of using those applications and then what happens to them. But they would still say that they want to do the infrastructure side of it. They still kind of see themselves doing what AWS is doing in Germany for Telefonica, for instance. And we're talking a lot about Microsoft, I know, but
I tell you what, I'll pivot it back. Seeing as I've started doing this thing of testing what Dag says against the formal propaganda at the time.
How does it line up?
So I'm looking at the press release for Alianza completes acquisition of Metaswitch from Microsoft to empower service provider growth and help telcos close a massive gap in services revenue. And then we got a quote here from Ferris Bueller. What's the name of your CEO?
It's not Ferris Bueller. It's Brian Bueller.
Like that on the
Brian Bueller.
Brian, I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep these
Sorry,
guys
Brian.
under control.
I was just trying to get my head around how to pronounce his surname, and Ferris Bueller just sprang to mind. Anyway, Brian Bueller said, quote, the acquisition of Metaswitch by Alianza will accelerate product innovation and growth for thousands of service providers across the industry who face similar obstacles modernising their networks. Network infrastructure and operating complexity is often an insurmountable barrier for, good thing I did this after only 1 or 2 beers, for communication service providers. But the combination of Alianza and Metaswitch, we're bringing together 2 world-class teams. Yeah, and then your 19 out of 20 global operators thing is further up the press release there. So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of brings us back to what you were trying to say at the start of, if I understood you and Ferris correctly.
That's Brian Bueller, for those of you playing along at home.
He's determined to upset your CEO.
Brian, I'm not trying to upset you. I'm just having fun.
You know Brian?
I haven't met Brian, no.
Wonderful human being.
I've no doubt. But I mean, you would say that.
But it's true.
You wouldn't say he's a dick.
What did we say at the start of this thing? We're in the business of increasing human connectedness. That comes straight from Brian.
Yeah.
Right. That's legit.
Yeah, and so this is me sort of active listening. And
a dick?
No, I'd say you wouldn't call him a dick.
Oh, okay.
Because he's your
All
CEO.
right.
I don't know him. I'm not calling him anything. All I'm doing is comedically getting his name wrong. That's as far as I'm prepared to go. Here, Brian, please don't take offence, mate. That sort of lifting the load from some of the plumbing, some of the sort of bits and bobs that you need in order that they can refocus on their core competence, and as Brian was saying, and as you've said, also refocus on, I think, and this is another theme that you touched on, and I know you're interested in talking about, innovating. Less worried about housework, more worried about just coming up with new bright ideas and increasing revenue and all that sort of thing. Am I broadly?
Yeah, you were headed down the right path.
Yeah.
There's an interesting analogy here. This notion of the journey that operators are on, right? Operators are on this kind of modernization journey. Think about all the old crap that they used to have in their network, like big TDM switches, or these big old legacy mobile phone switches. They started to modernize by moving to software, right? So they would take all those old big heavy systems out of a central office and replace it like with a software-based soft switch, as an example. So that was one step in this modernization journey. So they went from hardware to software running on IT-style servers. Then they started to virtualize those capabilities, right? They got really fancy and started to run multiple applications on a single piece of hardware, right? What's the next step past virtualization to run the applications that run core communications network?
That would be cloudification.
Yeah, but there's 2 flavors of cloudification. Ian, he knows what he's talking about.
Oh, yeah.
All right, cloudification.
We got into this on the last pod a bit as well, didn't we? But this is more on the RAN side.
But it's applicable to everything that they do to deliver their services. Cloudification can mean two things. Number one, they build or have their vendors build cloud native applications, right? Microservices based on Kubernetes orchestration, and they use that orchestration layer to very rapidly deploy new services, scale up, scale down.
And you get some of those thrilling diagrams with lots of rectangles on them.
And they go and they grow and they shrink, and the visuals are amazing for cloudification.
Well, they give you a headache.
One or the other. Take, for example, DT, right? DT is one of the leading consumers of, I shouldn't say consumers. They have built a full internal private cloud inside their network, and they are deploying core telephony infrastructure on their own private cloud. So going cloud native.
TCAS is that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
TCAS. Yeah. So, and they're asking us to deliver our elements.
He doesn't have a life. He just thinks about this stuff.
He's very serious about it. So we're building elements that are going to fit into the TCAS model.
Right. Okay. I didn't even know that.
So that's the Metaswitch kind of modernization journey, right? Because we started with hardware, and then we built software, and then we went yay virtualization, then we went yay cloud native.
Yep.
But
so you could, in the same way, you could go to someone like Orange with its telco cloud, or BT with it's almost called the same thing, isn't it? Network cloud.
Yeah. So those are all the same.
Yep.
So those are operators who are cloudifying internally and want cloud native applications to run their core networks.
Yeah.
We wanted to be a part of that, right? Because that is the beginning of the journey before they get to the point where maybe they want to go full outsourced cloud, right? Because before, that's what we had. Yeah. We didn't have any of the pieces leading up to the notion of full outsourced cloud. We would go to an operator and say, listen, you really don't want to run all this stuff anymore, right? You're spending too much time on it, and the people that know how to run it are all retiring, and you don't have space for it in your data center anymore. Don't you want to come to our cloud? We had 200 service providers say yes, and we've had thousands of service providers say no.
Yeah.
Because they want to continue to run their own infrastructure. They want to have control of it, but they want to modernize.
Well, that's something.
So that's that journey that we now.
So that puts you in. That would put you up. I mean, I know they're doing it in a different way with the sort of public cloud pitch, but it would put you up against the likes of AWS and this is what happens when you start going down this route. Talking about
my
the cloud.
can of beer just started voluntarily moving around on the table.
It's an AI can.
Get over here.
I saw it move out the corner of my eye, and I thought, am I fucking hallucinating? And moving around.
Are we getting this on camera?
Is the condensation making it slide?
I know.
No, it's the spirit world.
I know. This is like an alcoholic Ouija board going on. Come here, you
That is the weirdest thing I've ever. That's just because we're doing it on a Tuesday. This is what happens when you bring me into the office on a Tuesday.
You know what
I think this is.
Is there a Pope joke in here somewhere?
It's true. I think it's God taking the piss out of me for being flippant about the Pope.
I think that's what it is.
And he's going, all right, see how you like your...
You don't need this.
See how you like your beer moving away from you.
We're going to move this
smart
away.
ass.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
I was just saying this idea of you being the kind of cloud that, they outsource it further and you look after it for them, essentially, rather than them doing it themselves.
Yeah.
Puts you up against...
We do it on it. So we have a very strong partnership with AWS.
Right.
We have a very strong partnership with Azure. So our cloud communications platform lives in public cloud. So from that point of view, we are one way that Azure and AWS can actually go out and scoop up those telco workloads.
Right.
Because when we move an operator off of their own infrastructure onto the Alianza cloud solution, that's sitting on top of Azure, that's sitting on top of AWS. So we're driving that.
It's the kind of stuff that people like Red Hat and Wind River are doing. They would be kind of rivals to you in that market.
Not in the telco space, not in the communication services space,
right?
Because we're delivering communication services. That's all we do. So the modernization journey, right?
Yeah. Can I just quickly say one thing, because I do want to move in that direction, and we were chatting beforehand, and we thought there might be a quite topical AI angle.
Yeah, because that's what comes next.
Cool. Okay, so that's where your narrative was headed. So let me just quickly interrupt before we go there. One of the things when we've spoken about, not specifically what you do, but the more general public cloud courting of telecoms, has been sort of slightly adjacent to the stuff I was going on about earlier of the sort of sell and lease back sort of thing, which comes down to control. Just as if you if you own your house and then you choose to sell it to a developer and rent it back from them, that developer could kick you out of that house any time within whatever contractual obligations they've got. I always feel that about moving stuff into the cloud, you're relinquishing a degree of control. You're giving this third party domain over some pretty crucial stuff of yours. Now, of course, you'll have service level agreements and all sorts of stuff, which means they can't just take the piss and they can't hold you to ransom. But it still always strikes me as a slightly precarious move in that, in that respect.
To your point, though, that's the reason BT doesn't want to go into the public cloud.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very sort of strong on that they, if you talk to Howard Watson, which I did about this a few weeks ago in Barcelona, they're very sort of anti. I mean, I think UK regulations now make it quite hard to use the public cloud anyway for a lot of core network stuff. But
over and above sovereignty
but if you say to him things like, and this is on the record so I can say it, if you say to him things like, but doesn't the level of innovation that the public clouds bring and all the kind of supporting services around that make it sort of irresistible ultimately, he would say, yeah, but we're still kind of giving up control of something that we want to be responsible for in the end. You know, if something goes wrong, we want to look after that. We don't want a third party coming along and dealing with it.
Yes.
It's a choice, it's trade-off, I guess.
So some operators choose to maintain control, and they will never, until that opinion changes, they'll never move to a public cloud hosted solution for their core infrastructure. Fine, right? There's money to be made with them in that zone. For those operators that want to take advantage of innovation, for those operators that are willing to give up control in order to drive additional revenue, to drive additional services, well, then they make an alternative choice. And so that's what we've got. We've got both. We've got both in our portfolios now.
Can I ask you something that's a bit left field, because you said something before about being cloud native. Is it possible to be cloud native and cloud agnostic at the same time?
Oh,
because I've heard some people express the view that they're almost like that they don't. You can't be both. If you go all in with AWS, I mean, this gets to one of the points.
Is that what you mean by cloud agnostic? In that
cloud agnostic.
You're not wedded to one platform.
If you're wedded to one platform, and then all of a sudden you decide, actually, we don't really want to be with that platform anymore. We want to move to somebody else's platform.
No, we know all about this.
That's the idea of cloud agnosticism, I guess. But you have people who say, well, to be really cloud native, you actually have to go all in with one of them, and then that makes it harder to actually move across, because even though you've got these common tools like Kubernetes that are supposed to standardize stuff and make it easy to do that, you still get locked in different ways. There's the secret source. There's not secret source. What is it? Special source. Whatever it is.
Stop talking about source. What's wrong with you?
They get sort of added into the mix. That makes it kind of hard to shift.
It is difficult to write applications to run on both those platforms. Let's call it all three.
Yeah.
AWS, Azure, GCP. They are all very different.
Yeah.
Right. So the notion of cloud native has so many different meanings. But we initially built our platform on top of AWS, leveraging many, many different pre-built AWS services. 37 different services we used from AWS, which allowed us to build this highly scalable, highly reliable call control platform, portals, APIs, everything in a very short time period, because we didn't have to build all these underlying services around databases and load balancing.
That's what I gather has been one of the real unique selling points of AWS over the others, is that Amazon customer-centric thing. They just seem to have created so many tools that make it really easy for people to get involved.
Yes, that's why we built on AWS.
I mean, fair play to them.
But now, as a part of the Microsoft acquisition, we are taking our application and we're building it on top of Azure. And it's hard, right? Because the 37 services that we leverage from AWS don't exist over in Azure land.
Yeah.
And isn't there an equivalent?
Similar.
Like for like?
No, absolutely not like for
like. Right, okay.
Different services.
It's their own version of
yeah.
So our application...
I know, but I thought maybe it's the same basic service just with a different name.
Absolutely not.
Right, okay.
Very, very different. So we have to build our application on top of Azure. And so that takes effort.
Yeah.
But that's got a lot of interesting benefits, right? If our application is operating in both AWS and Azure, I can do things like fail over from, like if AWS goes out entirely, I can fail over to Azure. And when it comes to telco workloads... So
it's that redundancy thing. That's always been another concern I've thought about this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Not to cast dispersions, but AWS's basic SLA is 4 nines of availability.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good enough for telco workloads.
Right.
Telco, you have to be operating at 5 nines, right? Because you are providing...
Which means decimal point after 99.
Yeah, but it's how many hours a year you're out, basically.
It's minutes when you're at 5 nines, right? 5 nines is 56 minutes.
Yeah, that's
4 nines here.
That's what it translates
But I'm
to.
just making sure I understand. 5 nines means 99.99999%.
It means
uptime.
99.999.
5 nines is.
Oh, so the nines
5
include the 99 before the decimal point, right? I didn't know
total
that.
lines with the period
Well,
after
this
the
is
first
important
two.
shit, Ian.
Look up number of minutes of downtime for 5 nines. I think it's 56
Okay.
minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, look up 4 nines. It's like 8 hours or something. Point is, because we're delivering mission critical services, first responders, fire, police, emergency calls, right? People's lives are on the line with telecom services. We have to operate at 5 nines. And how do you build a 5 nines application on top of 4 nines infrastructure? It's hard.
Right. Do you want to know the answer that Gemini tells me? 4 nines, which as you rightly point out is 99.99. I don't know why I always assumed it was after the decimal point. Anyway, availability means a system is operational, leaving 52.6 minutes of downtime per
52.6
year.
minutes, yeah.
Which doesn't seem very
4
much.
nines or
Like
5
4
nines?
nines.
Yeah, but you translate to that amount of economic damage when your communication system goes down.
Yeah,
52
and it's
minutes
nearly
is a
9
lot.
seconds of downtime a day. We wouldn't tolerate that. I can't afford to be out
don't
of
mean you
circulation
specifically.
for 9 fucking
Like imagine
seconds.
an airport down for an hour. It's like, oof.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right,
Businesses
fair
not
enough.
being able to do call to anyway.
But I think it's interesting to talk about that because I think a lot of people throw those 5 nines, 4 nines out, and it's like, well, what does that mean? It sounds like the same thing almost. But if you actually boil it down to this is what it
So I try it
means in
with 5.
terms of even a few minutes out, it can be catastrophic for certain
if you're
businesses.
down, listen, I think about this a lot. Let's say we have an outage on our platform, and then somebody at home is having an emergency, and it's life or death, and they pick up the phone, and they can't make a call, and somebody dies.
That's an issue.
No,
It's not
Thanks a
good.
fucking lot.
We have systems in a major operator here in the UK where every single emergency call transits one of our systems. Every single one of the emergency calls that gets placed in the UK transit software that my team's built. That is a enormous responsibility, right? To make sure that every single one of those calls goes through, because
that's not part of the Metaswitch thing.
that's Metaswitch.
That's Metaswitch stuff.
That's Metaswitch.
Okay.
By the way, I looked up 5 nines. So it is just orders of 10. So 4 nines, you get 52.6 minutes of downtime per year. 5 nines, you get 5.256 minutes.
See, and this is why you come to this podcast, for the learning.
Yeah.
They're learning about the nines. It's all about the nines.
All supplied by Gemini.
Yes. I know. I mean, you can see why. Sorry,
Gemini is 2 years
You can
old.
almost retire yourself, Scott, and just have Gemini running.
tell you what, though.
Like,
I mean,
run a pod in the style of Scott Picena.
this is a great example of why. This is a complete tangent. This is a great example of why the SEO industry is fucked. Because I don't even look below the fold. I just for all these things. I've just read the Gemini thing. I'm not even looking for the first
Yeah, you're
link,
just
which
looking
is
for the AI.
which is from Stratus Technologies, ensuring 5 nines uptime.
The world has
Stratus
changed.
doesn't even get a look in anymore.
AI is the most transformative technology that we have experienced. in
Oh,
our
that's a good
lifetime.
segue.
Huh? How about
There we
that?
go.
It's true.
Yeah.
Because what's the next step in that modernization journey? Let's bring it all
Beyond
the way back
AI.
around.
Terminator, isn't it?
No, it's Skynet,
Yeah.
right? It's the complete enslavement of the human species. Yes, but before that,
Since you ask. What is
That's
it?
not the next.
before
step.
that,
Oh, right.
What did OpenAI, the guy Altman said? Like, yeah, it's probably being the end of humanity, but in the meantime, they'll be good companies.
yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
what he
We're all
said?
gonna make
Is
a ton
that
of money on
really what
AI.
he
He's
said?
the most.
Oh
he's the
my
most
God.
unblinkingly utopian.
I thought it was a
person.
joke. I thought it was a joke. Yeah.
No, there's plenty of people that think AI is going to bring about the downfall
I'm one of them.
human civilization. I
So,
don't
so
think
what's between where we are and Terminator? That's where you
Good
were
things.
just heading for.
Um,
You were talking before, you were talking
I
before
was-
we started recording about how you reckon operators can use it more.
Yeah. So let's not talk Skynet.
Yeah, I've got that on my system now. I have to do that once per pod. It's just a rule.
I think we're a little,
As long as we don't build robots, so they cannot make their way into the physical world, we'll be fine.
That's exactly the point I was going to make.
Oh,
AI
sorry.
has a very difficult time getting into the physical world. right? Robots are very.
There was a
sophisticated.
marathon at the weekend in China with some robots running in it.
I heard
and they
about
were, and
that.
they were,
So let's just stop doing that.
But they rely on batteries. They are.
Yeah, that's true.
The
I'm gonna-
human physical form.
Mate, I'm gonna massively push
as
back
much
on
of a
that.
specimen as you are, the humans. I'm
not sure what I'm
the
supposed to-
human physical form has evolved over millions of years and is just this amazing
Yeah. Apex.
system.
I'm like that
Yeah.
Da Vinci diagram.
That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Machines are not even close to that. So AI's ability to enter into the physical world is highly challenged.
So where I'll push back on that is yes, robots, not so much yet. So I'll park the whole Terminator shtick for a bit. But as more and more physical things, like let's say lighting and climate systems in offices or whatever, I think there's been some great dystopian films.
Car assemblies.
Yeah, I think there's been some great dystopian films about offices just turning malevolent or something like that because of the AI. There's all sorts of ways in which they control things that are ultimately physical. Even if the things they're controlling is electronic, they have a physical impact on us.
well, it could be
There's loads of
payment
electronic
systems or
things.
communication systems.
sure,
Yeah,
there's going to
exactly.
be impacts.
They could lock these doors, the glass door. We could break through them. It would take a while.
Yeah, you
but-
could be like, okay, so we're not Terminator, but to use another slightly
Well,
sort of
they might turn off our TikTok.
yeah,
That'd be great.
that'd be a nightmare. Do you know,
I encourage that.
I've never installed TikTok. No, I'm thinking, but there's 2001. There's HAL. So before
he's
you
not
get
physical.
to Skynet, you got HAL out of 2001, where he won't let the astronaut back in the thing. because,
Just don't go into the airlock.
I was going to say, just don't go on a
I mean,
space.
that was silly to go into the airlock, wasn't
No,
it? You should
but
have known that
let's-
was going to happen.
Let's
well,
bring
in
it,
hindsight, yeah.
let's bring it back. I'm not. What I'm interested in. We talked about the intersection of AI and telco, right? That's what I think is really interesting. You think about how much money and time and effort has been invested in telecommunications networks since the first telco networks started to get installed into the planet back in the late 1800s, right? All the wires, all the towers, all the radios, all the mobile phones, right? Deployed across this planet, all the satellites in space, deployed across this planet is this huge, massive telecommunications network sitting over here on one side. And then you have what is the most incredible technology that I said it before, I'll say it again, that any of us are going to experience in our lifetimes called AI. So how do we bring those two worlds together? What does it even mean to bring those two worlds together? All right,
Beyond chatbots when you're moaning about your phone bill.
beyond chatbots, and that's exactly the case.
God,
that I was gonna
chatbots
bring
have
up.
become very boring, haven't they?
They're
They
so
are super
passé.
boring. They're super boring.
There's just a delay until talk to an agent.
Yeah,
They're super
it just takes a bit
boring.
longer to get to a
Why?
human being.
Okay, so telcos. What are telcos doing with AI? Number one, customer service chatbots.
Yeah.
This is like the, oh my God, we're gonna. And okay,
That's table stakes.
Yeah.
let's make a distinction here. It's the distinction between AI that replaces humans versus AI that augments
Yeah.
humans. Okay. Service providers today are thinking only about the efficiency
Yeah.
by which they run their business. We were talking earlier about the services revenue gap and the fact that they've invested $3.6 trillion over the last dozen years. Revenue growth has been flat. They have not succeeded as a business in spite of this massive investment.
Yeah.
$3.6
And the only
trillion.
bright ideas they seem to have is streamlining.
Reduce
and-
costs.
Yeah, reduce costs.
That's efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. Okay? And AI for efficiency makes sense, right? We can replace all those expensive customer service human beings with an AI chatbot. Cool. Or how about we can replace all those expensive network operations technicians that sit there and upgrade the switches and make route plans and all the stuff that those network operations dudes do. Let's replace them with AI. What is that doing to drive value
Yeah.
to the customers that are buying the telco operator services?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Bit like all of 5G. I mean,
It's the
all of 5G
same
has just been
thing.
an efficiency.
It's been all about
proposition
efficiency.
primarily.
It's been about how can I deliver more packets more cheaply.
Yeah.
More packets more cheaply. Okay, and if you're an operator, well, let's throw this next layer on. Have you guys looked at the data coming in around mobile data growth rates?
Yeah.
You see where those trend
we
lines
talk
are
about that a
going?
lot with
Have you
a
ever
guy
heard
called
of
William Webb.
Yeah, have you
Yes.
ever heard of William Webb?
Yeah.
He's been on our pod a few times.
He's
talking
one of
about
our
that.
most regular guests, and he's been talking about that S-curve for
And
quite a long time.
where is the mobile data growth rate trend line headed towards?
Flat.
Effectively zero.
Yeah, in terms of growth.
In terms of growth.
Yeah.
We're getting to the point where we have all the data we need.
Even Ericsson's having to concede that more and more.
Are you not one of the believers in AI being a new AI applications being a spur of data growth?
To the end consumer of data, absolutely not.
Right.
Because if we do a little AI thing on our phone, okay,
Yeah.
I take my phone and I point it at you and I say, make you an AI donkey.
Yeah, bunny ears.
Right? Bunny ears. The amount of bandwidth necessary for that application is trivial.
Pretty tiny.
It's tiny.
Exactly, because all the processing is happening in the data center, isn't it?
You
maybe a
take
bit at the
an
edge.
image and you ship it off to a data center. All the heavy lifting's done at the data center. That is not going to drive bandwidth consumption between mobile devices and the core network.
I agree with that.
Okay, so what I think is we're reaching the point, we're not there yet, where we're going to have ubiquitous global coverage and have enough bandwidth everywhere. Elon Musk is working to make that a reality, right? Skylink, satellites, Starlink, Skylink,
Yeah.
Close enough.
Skynet, it's all
my Terminator
it's
talk.
all
It's got in your head.
okay. So
Well, there's an interesting one. Satellite substituting for terrestrial, ultimately.
Yes.
You think that'll happen? I mean, in terms of busy urban areas?
no, it'll be a mix. It'll obviously be a mix. You'll have Wi-Fi forever. You'll have 5G in cities. You'll have satellite in remote areas. It's going to be a mix.
Yeah.
We're still quite a long way from plausible Wi-Fi via direct to phone via satellite, aren't we?
I don't think so.
No? I mean, I'm not talking about Starlink, which goes to a base station and then gets routed from the base station to a phone. I'm talking the direct to phone.
T-Mobile's doing it today.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at tiny data rates. I mean, it's like text messages, isn't
It's
it?
phone call.
Yeah, phone
You
call.
can do phone calls now, can
Phone
you?
calls and a little bit of data.
Yeah.
All right.
My point
enough.
is
I've lost
operators
track of the
have
progress.
focused so much on delivering more bits, but we're going to get to the point where there's enough bits for everybody.
Yeah.
So the question
We're
then
good for
becomes,
bits.
what do you do
The whole
next?
point of 5G is like we have enough bits to.
We have enough to stream. We have enough bits to stream video wherever we want to.
Yeah.
Then we move on to Bob's.
in the highest resolution that we can see on this tiny screen.
Exactly.
So-
It doesn't need to be 4K, right? Because of the form factor of the phone. The point, I have a talk on this, and I just call it enough. Operators, you've been focused on delivering
Enough
bits for a
already.
very
I'm
long
sure
time.
vendors love that.
They're like, what do you mean enough? This is all we've ever done. This is all we know.
Yeah.
Of course we need more bits. More!
Forever.
Yeah, but there's a point.
You feel for them, don't
diminishing
you?
returns.
Because there was a time. I mean, I think he might have been slightly misquoted, but there was a Bill Gates quote from the 80s of like, "You're only going to need this much RAM" or something like that. And obviously, with computing, we've always used more and more capacity, but that doesn't necessarily apply. I actually agree with you. It doesn't necessarily apply
Moore's
to.
law is, they say, it is kind of dead though.
Like my
But I'm not even talking about
M4
Moore's law. I'm
MacBook
talking
is
about
fast enough.
the use of computing power. You know, there was a time where people thought, "Why the fuck would you need more than 128 megabytes of RAM or whatever?"
Yeah.
And then obviously,
But now I've got 64 gigabytes on my laptop,
Yeah.
and I don't need any more.
right,
The processor on my machine is fast enough, does everything I want it to do. I can edit 4K video
there's certainly no
on my
compulsion
laptop.
to upgrade it.
No, I
is there?
mean, like I could see like some professionals who need more when they render like 3D environments and stuff.
99% of the human
Yeah.
population
Yeah, it's
does not need it. Are there specialist use
Two
cases?
nines.
Edge cases, for sure. But there's always this point where you have enough for the majority of the use cases.
No,
We're reaching
Yeah.
that point on connectivity.
I agree, but I'd always put the caveat in that I'm fairly on the side of that argument, but we never really know what the future. Because I remember back in the days, I mean, having covered telecoms for even longer than Scott has, I remember back in the days of ADSL when there was resistance to rolling out full fiber networks on the basis of, look, ADSL, there's no way people are going to need more than
Sure,
20
I'm with
megabits
you.
a second.
I'm with
And people have, I think that people have, it's always been a sort of, there's been this sort of instinct to kind of resist the idea that you need to make, expensive upgrades to support new applications. And we don't really know what's coming down the pipeline. We couldn't foresee things like TikTok, I guess, sort of 15 years ago. Nobody knew about it.
I feel like it's always been video.
Yeah, well, this is William
Video?
Webb's thing. His
Like,
video's the
race
upper
towards
limit.
Video's
video.
the upper limit.
But I
It's the
think,
upper limit.
Video-
but I think there
Video's the
can
upper
be. We can make a distinction between a technology compulsion, like I've got to upgrade, as opposed to just a normal upgrade cycle. Like you've got your Mac there, and
It's 4 years old.
it's 4 years old. But when you eventually get a new one, you'll appreciate the much better spec it's got, but it won't necessarily be a compulsion. Or if it is, it might be in another 4 years' time where the thing's getting
Is that
properly
still
knackered.
working well?
Yeah, so I mean, I went via orders of magnitude. Like I had the Intel one before, and then the M1, so it was a huge leap.
Yeah.
M2, a bit
Not so
better.
much.
M3, a bit better. M4, it's better, but it's again
Yeah.
like
I have an M1 and M4, and I'm like, they're both great.
Yeah.
That's
They're
my
both
point.
great.
So when you do upgrade, this is my point. When you do upgrade, it won't be out of an overwhelming technological compulsion. You won't be like, oh, fuck, I've got to get an M6 or I won't be able to do my job. You'll just do it because your computer's getting knackered or you spilt a coffee on it or something.
Approaching enough.
the first few iPhones. There was a huge. The next one was like, whoa, look, it has this now. Now it's like,
Now?
What do you reckon they're going to call it when they get to the M16?
That could be a bit dodgy, couldn't it?
Now, so
They'll skip one.
Sorry, that was
They'll
rubbish.
skip one. That'll be a story. That was a bit of a dad
That was a rubbish
Okay,
joke.
so
Didn't go
M4
down
is
very well.
a rifle as well. Anyway,
So here's the punchline. Operators need to focus more on more than just delivering more bits, right? As we approach this notion of enough. And of course, you don't have high-speed connectivity on every inch of the surface of the planet, right? So there's an upper limit there's a limit to being able to do that. So, okay, fine. Let's continue marching down the connectivity road. But at the same time, in parallel, what service providers should be doing is figuring out how to deliver more interesting services to their customers using AI.
But that's been a dilemma of theirs forever, isn't it?
Forever. But I think AI is transformational because now
So I'm not going to put you in a corner and say, name a killer app or something like that. But you say it's transformational.
Real-time speech translation from any language to any language.
that's true.
Yeah, well, that's pretty fucking powerful. Especially for us Brits, where we don't learn foreign
I
languages.
can barely understand you sitting across the table from me, so I could be using this right now.
No, your cockney bollocks.
Yeah, I have that as well. And I live in this
Or is it
country.
Huawei has this thing called True Calling.
I can't understand you. Let me put my phone.
No, you'd be talking to someone like in China, and then you'll hear just
Yeah, like Babelfish
there's an
out of
application.
Hitchhiker's Guide.
Okay, so that's a
Isn't that one of the use cases though that would necessitate more network investment? Because people talk about things like latency.
absolutely not,
Okay,
because I'm going to do it in the core of the network.
but then you don't need the core to be moved closer to the edge.
No, I'll just do it in the core of the network. So
Sorry, why does that need a lot of
But his
network?
It doesn't. That's the point.
Oh.
It doesn't need a lot of network.
but Dag,
What it needs
his
a
point
lo-
about latency, where
it needs a lot of processing power in the core of the network. Absolutely. But I don't need more bandwidth between me and that core data center where I'm hosting this translation application.
But you know why when we talk about latency in the edge, we talk about just the distance between the user and where the processing's happening. Because if the distance is too far, the speed of light means that you get a bit of a delay. And so if you're trying to have a real-time conversation with someone and using this Babelfish thing that you were talking about, you don't want a 1 second delay or the whole conversation's fucked
Of
up,
course.
isn't it?
But
Scott,
Well,
sorry,
remember
actually,
how
I
this
don't know if
works.
that would
Remember
be
how this
fucked
works.
up, but-
So
I have another another Terminator moment for you, Scott.
Oh, right.
In between two of your favorite people, imagine Trump and Xi Jinping are having a call. And
Right.
the AI is translating, and then the AI like misses something or
Right.
like gets
no,
Just
something
when
wrong.
intentionally screws
World
it
War
up.
Three.
Yes.
Yeah.
Scott's
exactly.
point, like maybe it sounds frivolous, but Orange has made that point. They've actually specifically said to me in the past, this is 3 years ago, that one of the use cases for edge computing, this idea that you host applications closer to the end user, you move your core,
Yeah, but
distributed core.
You've got a caller in the United States calling somebody in China.
Yeah.
They are already here to here. They are, do the quick math. They're 9,000 miles away.
Yep.
Right.
Okay? Does it matter that you're doing the translation like close to the American caller or close to the Chinese caller? No, you do it in the middle.
Yeah.
So this guy, the American caller, his
fair
call
enough.
is going through the core data center. where
Yeah.
this
Well,
is
there
all
isn't
happening.
latency on the call, is there?
But where's the
Well, there is latency on a call.
Is it?
Yeah,
Not
there's
much,
latency
though.
on a call, but it already works. So when you
But the
call
point is, you're not adding additional latency through doing that processing.
only in the processing of doing the translation.
Yeah.
So if you have a high-powered enough AI system that can do real-time or very low latency translation of that translation of that speech, it doesn't have to be at the edge, right? Because you already have people 9,000 miles away. So you put it in the middle, in the core network, and that's where the translation happens. And you're only introducing a little bit of extra latency by doing the translation.
Are you pretty skeptical about edge computing generally, this idea? Because
there's going to be use cases for it, but not the conversation between two people who happen to be already on the other sides of the phone.
But I'm wondering what the use cases would be if that's one that, for real-time translation, which is one that's been cited to me as like a need for edge computing. I mean, Nvidia has this...
that makes no sense.
Nvidia has this... You probably come across this whole AI RAN thing because it was a huge talking point in Barcelona, selling GPUs to telcos.
Because that's
to host
they want to sell a bunch of AI chips at the edge.
I get why they're trying to do it, but then
insatiable.
But then does their business case for it stack up at all? Because obviously all they're interested in doing is selling more GPUs, and if they can't sell them to hyperscalers, then telcos
you got to talk about the applications. See, here, this is a really, really important point. I always talk about this notion of the AI tech stack. Okay, the AI tech stack. We've got the hyperscalers building out massive data centers, stuffing them to the gills with racks full of Nvidia GPUs, running the most modern large language models from Anthropic and OpenAI and Meta's Llama. Right? We have this amazing tech stack. Now, the most interesting thing is not what's happening inside of that tech stack. Data centers, GPUs, large language models. That's semi-interesting. But oh my God, we have so much power there to build interesting applications on top of.
Yeah.
So the really interesting part are, what are the use cases? What are the applications that we're going to build? And the applications that I want to build are in the communication services space. So I want to build real-time translations. Any human talks to any human over any phone call around the world.
I mean, you just spend a minute to think about how transformative that would be.
Call anybody, talk to anybody.
Yeah.
That's cool. But here's an even that one's pretty esoteric because I don't often call people in China, but
I think it's here.
Well, you might.
I think it sounds like a great app.
Because you can't understand them, you might do it once the translation thing comes.
No, I think it sounds like a great app, but is it a money-making opportunity for telcos? Because these apps themselves, I mean, they provide the infrastructure and they connect you, but the big problem with the telco business model is that they don't make the money out of the actual apps that get provided.
But it's not an app. It's a service on top of a voice subscription. So you've got a voice plan on your phone, right?
Yeah.
Little $5 add-on that says translate anybody to anybody.
Yeah. Voice plan plus.
Yeah, but somebody else could come along and do that. Some over-the-top company could come along and do that. I don't like being called over-the-top companies, couldn't they?
Of course. Yeah. But then let's take it to
they'll probably do it better. They'll link it to other things.
Let's take it to a business context, right? So you're a small business. You've got 10 employees who's got 10 random phones with 10 random cell phone plans. Well, not 10 random cell phone plans, 10 plans from BT. BT would love to sell that 10-person business with those mobile phone subscriptions some AI-powered services. So is there going to be a competition between apps on phones and what service providers can deliver? Absolutely. But there's some services that a service provider can deliver. Let's take this one. Residential fraud protection. Okay. Bad guy. You.
Well, it's got to be.
Why is it always me?
Because your name is Scott the Scammer, right? You're going to be Scott the Scammer.
I always like to have alliterative crimes.
Scott the Scammer calls my mom and tries to part her from her hard-earned retirement savings. So you call her up and you're like, hello, Mrs. Peak. Hey, looks like we've noticed some really bad fraud on your account. So could I get your, really quickly now, your username and password, your bank account information so that we can shut down this fraud immediately? And my mom, she's a wonderful lady, but she's getting up there in age. She's a little gullible.
My dad got scammed by a telco thing.
A telco?
Well, he got scammed by someone in India pretending to be phoning from VMO2.
This is my point.
And he was so gullible. My dad's a smart guy, like a sort of historian, but he got scammed enough to give them his bank login details.
I mean, this happened to my mom a few times.
Why do we not have an AI agent monitoring that call for scammy, fraudulent behavior?
Yeah.
But then it's like listening on your calls.
Okay.
Well, then you get some data protection thing going on where it trashes it after a day or whatever.
So you have in your pocket, where's your mobile phone?
Yeah.
Right? You've got location services turned on. You know that every Google search is tracked. You know that Facebook knows everything about you. And you willingly give up all of that privacy. You willingly give up every move you make, every person you're close to, every email contact. They know so much about you. And then all of a sudden, phone calls are special.
I don't have all the local location services on.
Do you know? Have you ever seen? There's a movie.
Ask app not to track.
That's just advertising. That's just advertising.
Sure. Yeah.
My point is that you could have a residential subscriber that signs up for this, right? And so they are saying, yes, please protect me. Please protect me from the scammers who want to call. And I would subscribe to that service on behalf of my mother. I would give that to her.
I'm going to butt in and wrap it up with a thought, because we've only got half an hour left and we want to cover one or two little bits of newsy stuff.
All right, good.
As we normally do. I mean, it's funny with pods, isn't it? Once you get into the groove, you feel like you can talk about this shit forever.
Well, good.
And yeah, I have to sort of keep half an eye on the time. But one thing I'll say, I take Ian's pushback, which is how is this specific to operators? Why are operators going to deliver this value add versus other people?
Because they own the voice call. They own the voice.
Because they own the voice call. So
in the middle of it.
So like my final thought on it is
That's
what they've
the
got to do better than they have done is utilize, or as Americans would say, leverage. I always push back on saying it because it's just annoying. It's utilize or use or make best. Yeah,
there's lots of things Americans that say that are annoying.
So well, leverage gets really overused as a word.
Actually.
I just think of leverage as like a physics thing, like a lever. Yeah, whereas it gets used.
I agree with you.
It gets used in place of use in the States.
Do you like the word utilize?
Well, that's. I mean, I just used it.
Well, that's even worse, I think. That's a horrible word.
No, I think you're right. I'm going to concede that point.
Should only be used in connection with Jeremy Bentham or something.
Okay. Utilitarianism.
Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, and what's the difference in utilise and use? The answer is none, so you should use the shorter word. I completely agree. But anyway, but the point we get sidetracked. But I digress, is that they've got to do a better job, as you were just describing, of obviously making the most of their existing commercial relationship with the customer, but also positioning themselves as the providers of these value-added communication services, because as the narrative's been for the last 15, 20 years, the OTTs stepped in. They stole their lunch and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
Dean Bubbler's going to be writing in saying, I can't believe you used OTT.
Oh, God.
Well,
sorry, Dean.
It's a very
I never
anachronistic
say OTT
term.
because of you.
It's an anachronistic term, and if that were to be Dean's criticism, I would plead guilty. But the reason I use it is because I thought it was interesting. When I got into this business 11 years ago, people were using the term OTT. I hadn't heard it before. And I realised they were using it as a pejorative. They're using it as a threatening thing.
Well, it makes it sound like a parasite, like
exactly.
a tick on a dog's back or
Well,
something.
from the service provider's point of view,
Well, exactly.
Parasitic.
That's how I took it.
From the bits that the service
That's
provider
what he doesn't
delivering.
like about it.
No, and I get it, and I'm deliberately using it in that way. But I think they've just got to stop thinking that way, and they've got to out-innovate some of these OTTs, for want of a better word.
That's what we're trying to help them understand.
Cool. Well, that's a perfect little inflection
come talk
point.
to us if that sounds interesting to you.
There we are. Little pitch.
No, do
Good
it
skill.
anyway, because we're just fun people.
If anyone's still listening to a pod at this stage, you don't want them as your customer.
Yeah, they're just grinding through to the end game.
You're just like, oh, what are you talking about? Are those fucking English blokes? Anyway, let's move on. A couple of bits of news. It's been like 2.5 weeks since we did a pod, and
Well, Ericsson's quarterlies weren't that long ago.
exactly, they were. I was just leading up to that. That was a week ago. So why don't I just pass the ball straight to you, Ian? Why don't you give us the top
Really?
line?
Do I have to try and remember what they've
Okay, I can take it from the top. I just didn't want to do too much
It's a
talking.
memory test off the top of my head.
Go on then. I mean, I've
I
got your
think
story
they're,
up. Let's see how much you fuck your own story up.
Well, I wasn't credit for my story. I was just going to do what their headlines
Oh, no, actually,
were.
no, yours is a different thing. Yours is the Boy at Home thing. We've got to squeeze that in.
That's a different story from the one
Okay,
I wrote after the
let me do their quarterlies and you do Boya.
Okay.
So my headline about their quarterlies, which is from a week ago, was increasingly dependent, US-dependent Ericsson.
Oh, yeah. Do
focuses
you know,
on-
I noticed your headline and I thought how strange that you went with the increasingly dependent on the US and I went
Yeah.
with the increasingly dependent on China angle, which are both right.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'll quickly summarise.
like
But they're right in different ways.
Yeah.
I think we should talk
We'll have a
about
fight in
that.
a
How
minute.
can they both be right?
That's a good point. I mean,
So answer the question, Scott.
I don't have an answer, but I'm sure you're
do.
about to give me one. I'll give you my angle, and then you tell me why the China angle is just as relevant. I was just basically looking at where their sales all are.
Yes.
And I actually bothered to go into...
That's the right answer.
Yeah, I actually... Thank you. Well, that's fucking weight off my mind.
You're getting there. Keep going.
And I've got right at the bottom, I went into their proper accounts rather than just their press release. And one in their accounts, they've got top 5 countries in sales. Number 1, United States.
Is that from 2024?
This is Q1 25, man.
Yeah. Ooh, that's even more than it was last year.
So Q1 25, 45%.
Yeah.
All their sales going to the US.
And you know what? It's probably an even bigger share of gross profit.
Yes,
because they sort of acknowledge.
They admit it.
When I asked Per about that, who's taken over from Frederick Yedling as the head of the networks group, and they were always a bit cagey about sort of saying what their margins are in different regions. And I just said, well, isn't the US more profitable? And he just went, well, I think everybody knows it's probably more
I spoke to him as well. He pretty much admitted to that. Even I didn't even need to prompt him that much because he was contrasting it with India.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they talk about the mix shift, and then when their profits have grown, and they're talking about the mix shift, which is this: basically, we're doing more work in the US than we are doing in India or Europe, and it's more profitable. It's fairly obvious what the implications are, but
well, we once had a person on the pod who we won't name because he said it in the pub after, who said that America's basically subsidising Europe because you know that the ARPU in the States is much higher than in Europe, as you're personally experiencing right now. Well, that's basically it. The American consumer. I mean, this kind of
shaft.
This kind of feeds into what I'm going to touch on in the end, and you may decide to sidestep it. Is some of Trump's grievances about how he thinks America's being treated badly by the rest of the world in trade.
Well, you can take
that
this
might
stuff
be
to
one
an extreme,
example.
but I think this is one of the reasons probably they don't want to reveal details about their margins because it exposes them to this sort of politicking. But you could say, if you're making all your profits in one country, it's allowing you to sell low priced equipment to the Indians or the Europeans, basically that Americans are paying for because they're paying. I think T-Mobile's ARPU is about $50 a month at the moment. You compare that with what Vodafone's making; it's less than $25 a month. So,
right.
Because I looked up the figures for that Ecom story.
I'm surprised that their ARPU's as low as 50. I know a lot of people are on $100.
It's twice as much. It's still twice as much as a UK operator. A UK operator, by the way, is not an African operator or an Indian operator. So you think, well, those guys are,
So United States is 45% of their revenues in Q1 2025.
That's amazing. I didn't even check that figure.
Yeah, well, see, that's why I'm the editor, mate. We're just fucking with each other.
I heard you were a very big deal, and now I can see why it's the
I'm kind of a big deal around it. Because I can screenshot bits of PDFs that other people can't reach. And in the same quarter last year, it was 37%, so that's quite a big jump as well.
It is, although I think it's probably skewed a little bit this quarter by by some stockpiling that's been prompted by tariffs.
Could well be. But then India in the same time, a quarter a year ago, is 10%, now it's 7%.
I think they pretty much said that themselves.
Yeah, no, India had a little spasm of buying their stuff. Guess who's third in their top 5 countries in sales?
It's not the UK, is it?
Yeah, we're third.
Well, the UK is
we're third at 4%.
Like Ericsson United, isn't it? Now we are, and Ericsson's basically all over the UK and the US.
They're just Anglosphere. If you speak English, because they're quite good, they speak English just in a slightly Swedish way.
That's pretty good, actually. Yeah. That did sound quite a lot like Boya.
And we love
got
it.
a very strong Swedish accent.
We love it. You know how the Americans like the English accent? We fucking love a Swedish accent.
Yeah, I do quite like the Swedish accent.
Everybody loves a good Swedish accent.
And then fourth is Japan on 3%. And I was slightly surprised to see China at 3%. Ericsson's still doing 3% of its shit in China.
Yeah, well, it's because it's such a big. Even though they've only got like a sort of 0.5% market share, probably left. It's like when you've got a million base stations, then.
But they're incredibly skewed towards America. So America's 45%. Next one down is India at 7%. So that was basically my angle on my story. And obviously it was. One of the reasons to focus on that is because everyone's having to make last-minute adjustments depending on the whims of Donald Trump and who he decides to fucking declare trade war on next. And that was basically it. I didn't write a lot of copy, but that was my angle. So why don't you, Ian, tell me why you focus more on China?
Well, the contrast with my headline with yours would be that, and yours is right, they're incredibly dependent on the US for sales, but that one thing that gets neglected is how reliant they are on China for, like there's this story Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a little bit overlooked because the perception, certainly the impression that Ericsson wants to create is that it's very much diversified its supply chain, which it has. It has manufacturing facilities in Texas. It has this highly automated factory in Louisville, I think it's called. They do a lot of manufacturing in Mexico. There's a story out today, I think Andrew covered it, about doing antenna development in India. They do a lot of their own design of their ASICs that go into the base station equipment. The other companies that figure prominently in that are people like Intel.
Did you see this slide on their presentation?
I did.
About resilience.
Yeah. And then the high end semiconductor stuff obviously doesn't come from China. It would come from someone like TSMC in Taiwan. Maybe there's a bit from Samsung. I don't know, but. The stuff that comes from China that's hard to get away from, and if you talk to sort of experts on this, like the guy reached out, I always reach out to. I
remember your angle. I actually linked to you.
Alum who's like basically takes apart base station equipment and gets out all the components and looks at it is all the passive components that come from China. So things that people don't really pay a lot of attention to, like inductors and resistors and printed circuit boards and the basic aluminium itself and some of the other things like gallium.
And that's actually what Per Narvinger said to me, was like,
well, I was glad
he
said it to me as well, because I'd written the story based on my sort of like background interviews, and then without getting a kind of comment from Ericsson, thinking I'll just do a follow-up the next day. And then when I asked him, he was like, well, yeah, it's true. This is why we need to create a separate... But so his take on this was we basically need... Because they don't want to upset the Americans, clearly. It's not very good to sort of create the impression that you're... very resistant to this. So their whole angle is we need to develop there needs to be work done on an alternative supply chain for some of these basic components, but it's going to take a lot of time to do that, which I think is pretty much what Pekka Lundmark had said when he was giving his sort of swan song.
China's been the manufacturer of the world for almost as long as I've been alive. I remember when I was a kid, people used to joke about like cheap shit from Hong Kong and stuff like that. And I'm 53 years old. So this is going back, 40 plus years that China... And, when they were talking about Hong Kong, they were probably talking as much about Shenzhen or whatever. Yeah. China's been the manufacturer of the world.
Yeah, so all that stuff...
Especially for the more commoditized stuff.
Yeah, and so this is why we're reliant on that stuff. And there's been a misconception, I think, in the industry that would it be cheaper to get your stuff imported into Mexico, do all the assembly and stuff there, and then move it into America, and you just face the tariffs on... like that Mexico has been, imposed with. So rather than shipping those components
America's freaking out about that trans-shipping or whatever it's called.
Yeah, so you've got
why they're hassling Vietnam.
This is a massive conversation in the industry. Like you move those components into Texas, to your Louisville facility, and do it there. Is it cheaper to move it to Mexico, assemble it there, and then move it from Mexico?
Right, I see.
But apparently there's a double whammy of there's like a double whammy of tariffs.
Yeah, every time you go over the border.
It's not about going over the border. It's like if you moved it straight into the States, you're going to get penalised on the components, and then you're going to have to assemble it.
Yeah.
If you move it into Mexico and you're thinking you can escape the shipping components into America because they're coming up from Mexico, anything that comes over, it's the components themselves they're looking at. Even if they're coming in from Mexico, if those components originate in China, as I understand it, they've closed those loopholes that mean that you're still facing, 145%, I think it had gone up to.
How does that work with the cars? All these Ford and GM cars?
This is the weird thing I think that people are not overlooking, is that even if you ship it in from another country, they'll look at the components themselves, and if they originate in China, they'll be subject to...
But surely they have to make exemptions.
Maybe it's different in automotive, but certainly in telecom, that's what I've heard. So it's kind of really damaging.
It's very convoluted, and I'm going to...
Sounds like an amazing plan.
It's a brilliant plan. And what it's going to do...
What could go wrong, Dag?
The brilliance behind it is just...
No, and you're completely right. And this we spoke about this a bit on the pod we did 2.5 weeks ago. And we were talking about things like comparative advantage. There's a reason why you get trade imbalances, because some countries, either through geography or through choice, happen to make a certain thing better and more cheaply than other countries. So you fucking buy it off them rather than starting from scratch in your own country. That's just comparative advantage. But yes, your point about that subset of components from China. Okay, so we're not buying ASICs from China because America, actually, this predates Trump, to be fair to him. America's been hassling China over the chip industry and all that sort of thing for quite a while. In fact, this overlaps to the thing I want to finish off on. They're putting pressure on people like ASML and TSMC and all the other acronyms.
Yeah.
But
high-end
China makes
semiconductors is an area where we're not reliant on China.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that has been sort of belligerent policy that predates Trump. But yeah, China still makes a ton of stuff. And just having this flat 145% tariff is obviously going to create lots of problems. So yeah, point well made. Let's just move on, because we're really running out of time. You had another Ericsson angle, and so I did link to your story, which was headlined "The Made in China Tariff Quagmire for Cisco, Ericsson, and Nokia."
Oh,
actually, one other little comment I want to make.
I mean, that's what I've just talked about. Really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've got to give a shout out to Jerry, who used to do the PR for Ericsson.
Jerry.
All right, Jerry. I wrote a little paragraph. I said we spoke to Per Narvinger, who recently took over from Frederick Yedling as the head of Ericsson's networks division, and whose name is easier to spell. And she sent me a message saying that cracked her up. So thanks for that, Jerry. It's always nice to get a bit of appreciation. But it's just true.
That's why he was promoted into that role, basically.
I used to always try and work
Frederick Yedling's name.
Well, because he throws in an extra J, and I never used to remember where the extra J goes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
in there somewhere.
At least you didn't call him Tony Yedling, as I did once.
No, I used to call him Freddie. I used to call him Freddie Lundberg.
I think I called him Harold Yedling for some reason once in a story.
Harold.
Yeah, and then I got an anonymous email from someone saying, "I noticed that Harold Yedling's name has been misspelled, and his first name isn't Harold; it's actually Frederick."
You're just going with
spelling.
You're just going with random Viking names, aren't you? Just Frederick Redbeard or something. Okay. And then quickly, you've got a story slightly about the same time actually. Ericsson was saved by Börje Ekholm, and how do you pronounce those two dots over his O? Is it
Börje? I think
Börje,
it's supposed to be.
right?
It's an umlaut, isn't it?
There we go.
You should know that. You're the language person. You speak Spanish. There's loads of umlauts.
I'm pretty far from the language
Spanish,
person.
Yeah.
Ericsson was saved by Börje Ekholm, and now his future looks in doubt. Why are you saying that his future looks in doubt?
Well, because there was a report by a prominent Swedish financial site who'd gone out apparently and spoken to lots of people who are on the investor side. So there's two companies that really own Ericsson. Investors, they've got really boring names. One's
big Swedish institutional investors, aren't they?
Yeah, they're big institutions. One's called just Investor AB or something.
It's not very imaginative, is it?
Varden.
So what do you guys do?
Yeah. And it's the Wallenberg, the families, they're sort of family controlled, aren't they, these organisations?
Oh, it just seems like something out of A Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, doesn't
it's
it?
very much like that. One's the Wallenbergs and one's the Lundbergs. And the chair, apparently the chair, the sort of chair of what's the first one? Investor is Mr. Wallenberg, and the chair of Industry of Arden is Mr. Lundberg, and they're both kind of upset. The story was they're both kind of upset with Ekholm's management of.
And let's remind ourselves that
Ericsson.
Ekholm came from one of them.
He's very close to the Wallenbergs.
There we go.
I think he was employed by.
He was actually there, wasn't
by
he?
Investor AB. I think he worked there. That's his background. Is on the financial side.
And they just went, "Fuck it, let's send one of our lads in." to run
But the story was very much about them not being very happy with the way. I mean, in a way, it doesn't surprise me because. Anybody who's like an investor looking at the RAN market these days would be like, what the hell were we doing involved in this? It's pretty awful. In
hindsight, that's not where you put your money, is it? You would put all your chips into that.
And then there were some very specific things highlighted that it wouldn't surprise you why they were upset that they'd happen. I mean, his big missteps, I think, have been the acquisition of Vonage in particular.
Yeah.
That was the real
disaster. If you look at the write-downs.
And they'll try and I think a lot of my story, that my write-up on it was really looking at that and what's happened with it business-wise, because they've written it down. I think they bought it for 6.2 billion in mid-2022 and they've written it down by 4 billion since then.
Yeah.
It's not made very much for them in terms of revenues. They've got this argument about it being like the cornerstone of their push into network APIs.
Yeah, but where have network APIs really gone?
Exactly. Where have network APIs gone?
Where's
and why
the
did they need
real
to buy
value
that
there?
anyway to do it? And like Nokia says it's doing something and it didn't need to buy this company to do it. They've spun off a bit of Vonage, which you'd think that must be the valuable bit if it's involved in the network APIs thing. It's gone into Aduna, this thing with 12 operators. That's a not-for-profit, basically. So where exactly is the value in this?
And then the other bit
it's
is
all
more
very,
of a
very
UCAS
bad.
sort of thing, isn't it?
That's what it originally
That's
was.
that's what it is. So you could understand them being upset with him for that, which is, by the way, is Ericsson's biggest takeover in its history anyway.
Yeah, and it's all gone Pete
And
Tong.
it's not gone very well. And
Pig tongue?
Pete Tong is a bit of contemporary Cockney rhyming slang. Horribly wrong. It's all gone Pete Tong. It's all gone horribly wrong.
Okay, just keep learning things. It's great.
Yeah.
and
Pete Tong was a DJ, I think.
I mean, I think where it's harsh on him is he's definitely. I mean, hopefully the piece I wrote was quite balanced, because I think he came along at a time when Ericsson wasn't in a very good position in 2016 and had sort of like diversified too much and had taken its eye off the ball in RAN and had lost its way to Huawei. And one thing he did was very much double down on that business, put a lot more back into research and development. You know, you heard people saying they'd really fallen behind the Chinese on 5G in the early days. Ran about
no one thinks the
2020.
Westberg era was particularly amazing, do they?
2020, 2021, people
Except for
making
Verizon.
very nice voice noises about Ericsson's radios. You know, they're back in the game. You look at them now, they're the biggest 5G vendor in the world outside China.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously there's been geopolitical pushback, but they're in a really good position. They are the undisputed 5G leader. I don't think anybody would, you know, apart from Huawei, arguably, in China and countries where it's still allowed to operate. But you know, he's done a really good job on that. And unfortunately, though, that 5G business is not in a very good position. It's like declined quite massively over the last couple of years. So the criticism of him could be that he's made the company more reliant on, he's bet all of it.
Something that turned out to be not such a big deal.
Something that hasn't worked out maybe as we'd hoped it would. And
and they have to keep doubling down. And
he's very dependent on, to your point about your headline in your story, he's very reliant on the US.
Yes.
He's incredibly reliant on the US, which these days is maybe difficult geopolitically to be a Swedish company heavily reliant on.
There we are. There's a good segue, because we've literally got 10 minutes left, and I wanted to squeeze this in. Sorry, Dag. I know I haven't. I saw you making a couple of notes. Did you have one thing you want to say before
Pete Tong. That was
That's a brilliant note.
That was my note.
That's a brilliant note to make.
So Pete Tong, horribly wrong. Well, given that you live in the UK, you got to come hang out with us in the pub sometime.
Yeah, we're going to do that.
We'll give you some more rhyming slang lessons. Because I mean, I invite you now, but I think you've got another appointment.
I've got calls,
yeah.
which is going to be fun after our little session here.
Right. Well, we're going to be over the road, so if when you get those calls done, you think you need a beer, just keep in touch.
Yeah, we're going to do that. This was a lot of fun, guys. Thank you.
So let me just quickly round it off. I'm going to talk about American foreign policy just for you, Dan.
Oh my God, I love this.
Just so people know, when I do the podcast, I do give our guests a little bit of a heads up, and you know, I think it's bad podcasting practice if I started banging on about something where my guest wouldn't feel comfortable talking about it. What the fuck would be the point of me bringing it up? So that's why I'm leaving it to the end, and I invite you, Dag, to say fuck all if you want. But I wrote a story. The last story I wrote before we slunk off for Easter was headlined, "Bellicose US state declares war on its own companies." A slightly sensationalist headline, but you know, that's what we do. And then my subhead was, "Not content with alienating its global allies," by which I'm referring to, you know, like JD Vance sort of slagging off Europe in Munich and that sort of thing. The US state is behaving in an increasingly hostile way towards domestic companies too. And the two premises for me saying that, the main one was Nvidia that we've spoken about earlier. Nvidia does quite a lot of business with China, but a decreasing amount. I did look it up. I don't think I've put it here, but maybe I've written it. But there we are. Here we are. So for a little while, and this does predate Trump a little bit, America's been really hung up on China catching up with America on AI, catching up with people like OpenAI and Grok
what
and
DeepSeek
Grok and
did.
Anthropic. Yeah.
What was it, 2.5 months ago?
And then that other one,
really
Manus as well.
Manus, don't know that one.
Yeah, that was like the next DeepSeek thing. It was quite a big deal. It's interesting, actually.
Even
it was a big
better
deal.
than DeepSeek.
It was a big deal for about a week or two, and I asked my colleague Armita, and she wrote a great piece on it, and now it's sort of gone off the radar. Anyway, and as I'm sure most people know, in order to be good at AI these days, you've got to buy a shitload of GPUs off Nvidia, which is one of the reasons it's one of the most valuable companies in the world right now. Anyway, and they did a SEC, a Securities Exchange Commission, the US sort of financial regulator, I guess, whatever they are. They did a filing to them that said because of a recent thing that the current government had done, they were going to, in the next quarter, they were going to take a $5.5 billion hit, which is a fucking lot of money even for Nvidia. And what they'd done is there's this chip called the H20. So Nvidia's got all these chips. I think they mainly start with H, but I'm out of my comfort zone on that. And they're not the ones that you have in your gaming PC. They're the ones that they sell to data center people that do all this number crunching.
These are the AI chips.
Yeah, they're the AI chips that do all the number crunching, all the LLM training and all that sort of thing. And America keeps going, look, we don't want you selling the fucking dog's bollocks chip. There's another one for you.
Okay, noted.
That's a very Englishism. Dog's
Don't get it mixed up with a dog's breakfast, by the way.
Yeah,
Is that different?
Yeah, that's bad. They're polar opposites, basically.
Dog's
on the
bollocks are
spectrum.
good, and I think the form of it is that they must be good because dogs spend so much time licking them that they must be good. So if we call something a dog's bollocks, that means we think it's good.
Okay.
But the dog's breakfast is like a mess.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Wait, hold on. Good.
Yeah, the bee's knees is like
Bad.
bee's knees is equivalent.
Dog's
to
bollocks good, dog's breakfast bad. He's learning so much. Now he's going to be able to go to his local in Enfield and just fucking elbows out, going, right, geezers,
Lay it on.
how's it going?
It's gonna be a Guy Ritchie movie.
So they were saying you can't sell these dog's bollocks GPUs to
which one's
China
that?
because
Okay,
otherwise they might catch up with us on AI. So you can only sell sort of like de-featured ones. And one of those is called an H20. And they went, all right, then we won't send them the H100, H200, H10 million, whatever. We'll send them H20. It's a bit shit, but it's still good enough that they'll buy it. And they were like, okay, that's all good. And then the other day, Trump went, nah, you can't sell that either.
So we could keep going down the...
Exactly,
ladder.
down to the H fuck all. And that's what's costing them 5.5 billion. So that was one of my reasons. And then I made a little point because I looked at their quarterlies. In 2023, Nvidia derived over 21% of its sales from China. And then 2 years later, it's fallen to 13%.
Going through the numbers.
I know, mate. I leave no stone unturned. So from 21% down to 13%. So it's lost like a third of its business in 2 years. And yeah. And then this Congressional House Select Committee on the CCP came out with this report that's going, look at all these sneaky fuckers are up to now. And it was basically a pretext for putting even more pressure on people like Nvidia to stop selling to them. And then the only other thing I said to justify my headline was a thing that came from the current head of the FCC, which is the Federal Communications Commission, is it?
The Federales.
Yeah, they're basically
it's not the Federales.
the Americans Ofcom.
Similar, but different.
Yeah. By the way, did you know that when I Googled Alianza, the first thing that came up was a Peruvian football team?
Yeah, those guys are amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love them.
You should sponsor them.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Alianza sponsored by Alianza. That'd be a bit confusing, wouldn't it? And he did this tweet, Brendan Carr, who I've largely favoured over the time I've been writing about him because he's very pro free speech, as am I. But now he's not pro free speech because
he's pro free speech where it suits him.
Well, exactly.
Which is pretty much what everybody into free speech is about these days.
Selective bollocks. Not me. I'm principles.
I know you are, but nobody else is.
And anyway,
Yeah, Elon Musk is a free speech.
he's very much into free speech. Elon
absolutist.
Musk.
until someone slags him
Until you
off.
say something about a Tesla.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's having a go at Comcast. So this is a telecoms relevant thing. Comcast is obviously a very big telco and media company in the States who own,
NBC Universal.
yeah, and on the telco side, it's fixed line mainly, isn't it? Comcast.
They do a wireless thing with I think they're doing it with an MVNO thing. So
Right,
they're
an
mobile
MVNO
safety.
thing. But I think they're more known for fixed,
Yeah.
to the best of my knowledge, but I'll defer to the American in the room. Anyway, he's had a go at them because, as you say, they own MSNBC and NBC. And he didn't like how they covered. There's this big story that's going on in the States. I only know this because I listen to far too many podcasts. Due to one guy who just got turfed out of the country and sent to some fucked up prison in El Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't like the way that Comcast outlets were covering it. I mean, I'll read Brendan Carr's tweet 'cause it's quite short. I'm just firing it up. Here we are. This is a quote from his tweet. Comcast outlets spent days misleading the American public, implying that Abrego Garcia, who's the person in question, was merely a law-abiding US citizen, blah, blah, blah. When the truth comes out, they ignore it. Comcast knows that federal law requires its license operations to serve the public interest. News distortion doesn't cut it. Now, why this is dodgy? Yeah. Why this is dodgy?
Because
apparently it doesn't. Apparently it doesn't apply to. No, apparently it doesn't apply to cable. When he says licensed operations, the FCC only has any jurisdiction over pure broadcast like NBC, ABC, CBS.
Right.
Apparently cable is not in their remit at all. But what he's basically doing is he's trying to menace the owner of all of those organisations and tacitly threatening to withdraw the license for NBC, which is the one that Comcast owns, because he doesn't like how they've been covering a fucking story.
I'm not American, so I can say this. He's a sinister motherfucker, frankly.
Well, he seems to be from this.
The T-Mobile was pressurised to take down all of its DEI stuff in its annual reports. A day later, their takeover of Lumos got approved by the FCC. They did an interview with the FT actually really recently. You might have covered it, where they were saying it's time for Europe to choose between Chinese and
yes,
USA.
I did cover that.
Making some quite sinister comments about it that were more extreme, I thought, than anything that had been, that people had come out with in the first Trump administration.
It's chaos.
Yeah.
It's the levels of chaos that are emanating from my storied country is shocking to me. It really is. And business is like predictability. Right? And everything that's happening right now seems so just capricious. And just winging it.
And
it's whimsical and news-driven and personality-driven. And so it is...
Just shooting from the hip.
It is not good for anybody.
To swing it back to the Ericsson Boy Echo thing, by the way, one thing in the reasons that the investors in Sweden aren't particularly happy, or some of the criticism that he's had, massive in the Swedish press, by the way, but very overlooked outside Sweden, is Ericsson dropping all of its DEI references in
I saw that
report.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I went through them. If you look at the 2023 annual report compared to the 2024 one, they've got this huge section in 2023 about diversity.
Sure. And we are feeling that pressure.
And it's gone. That section's just been removed from 2024.
No, I know the Swedes have been covering that a lot.
And they also donated quite a bit of money to Donald Trump's inauguration, which he got criticised for in Sweden. And then he had to do an interview with the Swedish press and sort of justified it on the basis that this is how business is done now in the US. Yeah.
Well, he's got a crypto scheme going on, so you could actually pay him technically.
Pay him in his own crypto.
If you want to ask,
what they call them, shit coins. Pay him in his own shit coins.
Yeah.
So I know that you've got a meeting and Dag's got to clear off. So I just got one final thought I've got on that. Isn't obviously the Pandora's box I just opened, we could go to the pub and talk about it at fucking great length. But one thing that occurs to me when I'm writing about it is the double standard that goes on with the narrative we get about China and Huawei. What we hear from a lot of people is don't do business with Huawei, don't do business with Chinese companies because they're too closely aligned to the Chinese state.
Well, it's only a double standard if you bring yourself down to their standards.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm leading up to. And so don't do business with Huawei, don't do business with Chinese companies because you're basically doing business with CCP and their baddies. But if the stated problem is that companies shouldn't be too closely aligned to the state, and yet we've got this incredible amount, and this does predate Trump, but it's definitely ramped up under Trump Mark II. We got this incredible amount of state pressure on companies like Nvidia, like Comcast, and loads of others. And they're exporting it. They're hassling ASML, which is a Dutch company, and TSMC, which is a Taiwanese company. I don't see how that's so different. That's my point.
Yeah, well,
I don't either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe that rare moment of unanimity is a good point to end.
It's been a good pod.
Yeah.
I say as someone involved in it, it's obviously up to the audience to decide, but I quite enjoyed this.
People might write and go, no,
it's because the ones we've done this year have been rubbish so far.
But this one? All right. I had a good time.
No, well, thank you. Dag, that was a pleasure. And seeing as you live in the UK, keep in touch.
We will. Definitely.
And we'll keep chatting about all this stuff, and that broader issue of telco sort of innovation, which we didn't really, we only sort of scratched the surface of on this one.
we did when it's
We had to get Trumpy. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, no, that was. I deliberately left that to the end because I know what I'm like.
There is only a bit of Trumpy.
Yeah, and I also knew that it would be awkward for you to comment too fully on it. But yes, keep in touch and come on a pod again soon, and come to the pub with us, where you can really vent about some of the things we've been
give
speaking
everybody
about.
my true and deep feelings on the topic.
Okay, well, it's great to meet you, Dag.
All right, you as well.
And we're doing another one soon. So this is Tuesday, coming out Wednesday. We're going to do another one on Friday. So thanks for listening, and make sure you join us for that one.
Thanks for sticking along with us, everybody.